it's like night and day. They launched their initial proprietary version, and then later they launched the open source version, and the open source version like hits the front page of Hacker News. Developers are just more philosophically aligned with the idea of open source than being proprietary.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling Dev Tools, and I'm joined today by Ant, who is the co-founder and CTO of Supabase. Ant is returning. And also, I just want to say this is the 100th episode of Scaling Dev Tools, and I really wanted Ant to come back because it was such an amazing episode. First time round, I think it's the most listened to one we've had, and Ant's awesome. So, Ant, thank you so much for coming back.
Well, congrats on getting to 100 episodes. That is honestly crazy. I feel like we should probably turn it around on this one and be asking you what you've learned from the first 100. Like, what are the standout things that you've learned from doing 100 episodes?
Well, I would absolutely accept that, but I feel like everyone is just going to want to hear what you've got to say. But I can tell you what we learned from your episode what I learned from your episode last time, because that was absolutely a very valuable one. And I think you spoke a lot about finding your product market fit and just like kind of keeping on launching, and how like you just kept trying new things and you found that, this messaging that worked, and it just hit. You also talked a lot about like memes and about how they actually work. And I think that was kind of one lesson that I took from you, is like, you just have to try things, see what works, and kind of follow those like first principles rather than just looking to kind of experts to come along and tell you what to do, or like read this article in some TechCrunch or something of like, oh, I should do that. But like just try things and follow that. I think that was a huge thing from you.
So I can't convince you then to talk about how do you possibly find the time to have done 100 podcast episodes?
I think it's like keeping it fun, and that's the key. Is like I talk to people that I want to talk to. Like,
yeah, no. Regarding the stuff we spoke about last time, I think now, I mean, that must have been like almost 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. We had the conversation.
I think it came out in March 2023. So
yeah, and I think I'm now even more like those ideas have like crystallized even more now. And I think like, when we were trying to hire for a head of marketing, I went through this like 6-month process where I found 35 people who were like CMOs or head of marketing in other startups, companies. And I spoke to them all for hours and hours, trying to figure out like, what are we missing? Like, what is the thing? Like, how do we make the next step into like going up market or anything? And what I ended up learning, what the advice from almost everybody was like, well, what's working today? And I'm like, well, it's X, it's Y, it's memes, it's this. And they're like, well, you just double down on that stuff. Like, you've built this engine and have found success. Like, why would you not just like double, triple, quadruple the thing that's already working? Like, why are you trying to take these different approaches? And that was quite like nice to hear. So we could go away and just be like, yeah, let's just throw more fuel on the fire, make more memes, just double down on like talking to developers basically. And that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years still.
Yeah. And so it's not really been like a huge, like what you're doing now is not so different to what you were doing 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And we've built a team around that now. So recently we hired this guy, Craig Cannon, to be our like head of DevRel marketing. And Craig's like the perfect person to do this for Supabase, because he like set up a bunch of the he launched the podcast at Y Combinator. I think he launched the YouTube channel at YC. So he kind of like knows a lot about like online marketing, which is one thing we think a lot about. Like we're not so heavy in events and in-person stuff just yet. It's like all online. And so he's an expert in that. But also he previously ran this hackathon series in the US, which was like comedy hacks, like a comedy hack series where he would get comedians and developers and pair them up and have this hackathon where it was, and then do a show, do like a comedy show at the end where they would present all these things. And I was like, this is like the perfect person to run marketing at Supabase, because like that's what we are, right? It's like online, it's developers, it's like having a sense of humor, like a bit of self-deprecation. And yeah, and so building a team just around that motion is where we're at now. Like, it's really fun, honestly.
That's so interesting. So you basically were like, okay, so what we do is like, we do, there's a bit of content, online content with a bit of a kind of funny angle. How do we scale this? It's hire the guy who knows how to do both of those things well and do more of it.
Yeah, exactly. And just to go back and maybe talk about like, we have this incredible DevRel team. These guys, like a team of 4 who are just experts in YouTube, experts in creating like great example applications, experts in partnering with other companies to create integrations and then make videos and content about those integrations. And one change we made, I think probably about a year and a half ago, was previously we were creating content for like education to like help people get the most out of Supabase who already knew about Supabase. But the thing we were missing was using YouTube as an acquisition channel. Because now if you Google something, after the first 2 results, you often get like 3 YouTube videos. Like, here's the video things for whatever you're looking for. And also like on your YouTube homepage, like what we want is people discovering Supabase via YouTube. And so we made that change to start targeting people who didn't already know about us. And so again, like having Craig come in, who's done that at YC and created, the YC YouTube now is just like, is so good, right?
So good.
And obviously like Gary has doubled down on that, and Gary's done an incredible job of like taking that to the next level completely. But that's a lot of the thing that we've been working on with the DevRel guys. They were just like churning out like this like incredible content every week. And again, just like that's all been a part of the strategy. Yeah.
So how does that work in terms of, how is that different to just like educational content? Like it's like the titles and stuff, or it's because it's more entertaining, it shows up on like suggested videos, or like?
I think it's like spending more time thinking about like the titles, the thumbnails, like the descriptions, like basically watching all of the Mr. Beast content, like all that advice on how to do better there. But from a content perspective, it's less about like, oh, here's this new Supabase feature, and it's more about, oh, I'm going to build this thing with Next.js and with Vercel. And maybe you just like happen to be also using Supabase to build this project out. And you'll talk about some of the topics, how to get the best performance out of X, and it's not just Supabase related. And this also ties back to the stuff we talked about, I think, last time, which is like the way to do marketing in general on social, I feel, is that you can't just go out and talk about like yourself and talk about your own product and so here's my thing, it's so amazing, it's going to solve all your problems. It's like you can't just do that. You've got to talk about like just like developer culture in general. It's like, here's the things that are happening. Oh, and by the way, we launched this thing, and sort of like do it as an seems to work way better than just having a feed which is just like feature A, feature B, feature C. Like no one's going to pay that much attention, especially if you're very early on.
Yeah. I feel like you understand your audience like really, really well. And I feel like a lot of it is just like you're kind of saying something that that shows how much you understand, and it's kind of funny, and like it's like but it's not saying use Supabase. It's like,
And I think that's like, one thing that's super hard to quantify is brand awareness. And that's something we pushed a lot, and you have to push a lot on the early days, because you just need people to know who you are, like to recognize the logo. Again, before they start to appreciate like the specific features that you're pushing. Um, but it's all about, it's just finding that balance. And like we do a lot of like humor stuff and memes, but you also can't like go all in on that and make that like your entire like profile, because especially now that much larger companies are using Supabase, like the thing they care about the most is like the stability of the platform, the performance, the security. So you also have to like present that stuff as well, which is harder to do. But like I said, it's all about like kind of sneaking it in at the like get them with a hook, and then inform them that, oh, by the way, like we outperform XYZ.
Yeah, that's what that's almost exactly what Aaron Francis said when I interviewed him. Actually, he was like, you have like a nugget of a thing that you want to talk about, and then you kind of wrap it up into like something fun or interesting.
Yeah, and like Aaron's great. Aaron's one of the best at this. Like you watch his trailers for the courses he's about to launch. It doesn't like he's about to launch a Postgres series.
Oh, nice.
And he doesn't mention Postgres in the trailer, like. And
how?
But he it's all about like his process for like building anticipation. I've spent a lot of what he's selling you is the fact that he's put hundreds of hours into building this course. He's not selling you Postgres. He's not selling you like how to make a table. He's selling you like, I've invested all this time. Do you want to learn about the things that I've learned on this journey? Which is great. Like, and obviously like the quality of his trailers and the quality of his videos is just very high, which I think differentiates them from almost everybody else who's filming content in the bedroom like me.
This is the kitchen. 100%. That makes total sense. And so in terms of awareness, so I think last time we spoke to you, I spoke to you, people knew Supabase, and you were already doing really well. I think you had like 40,000 GitHub stars, a metric. And but since then, so I started using you with a contract, like, and that was actually like, I didn't bring in Supabase. I was doing a contract and they were already using Supabase. And at Stack Overflow, you've got like 4% use among developers surveyed, which is like kind of crazy. I think Oracle had 10%. And so, people are using Supabase now. So was it the same stuff like that you did to get here?
Yeah. Our goal, by the way, is to be the open source Oracle. Like, so as many users we can win off Oracle, the better. I think people are realizing in 2024, you don't need to spend $5 million a year on your Postgres database.
They could do 4 million with Supabase, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's crazy because now I went on Upwork the other day, and you type in Supabase, and like there are people every single day putting jobs on Upwork, being like, "Oh, we're hiring for a Supabase developer. We're hiring for this job. We need Supabase skills." Blah blah blah. And like, it's just that's mad, because if we go back like 4 years, like we just never would have thought that would be the case, And the Stack Overflow survey is interesting because on the same chart you have Postgres and Supabase.
Mm.
Because Supabase at its core is just Postgres. It's a
Yeah.
Postgres hosting provider. So it's so interesting that people would call it by name. People would call it by Supabase.
True.
And not just say, "Oh, I use Postgres," because
Mm.
maybe it's not like so clear to everyone who signs up that it's just Postgres.
Mm.
But that's a big part of why people use us, right? Is because there's been this like huge wave back towards Postgres over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I guess because a lot of them would have been using Firebase, I guess, and that Firebase is like the name is the database, basically as well.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and in general, like we love Firebase. Like Firebase is one of the reasons we started Supabase. But there just is a trend away from NoSQL back towards relational databases, which we've rode, which has been good. And also like I think the key behind people adopting Supabase at the start has always been easy to build, and you're not gonna have to churn later. And that's what you get with the Postgres
Yeah.
bit is like that confidence. Because as like I've been in this position as a startup CTO. You don't have any users yet, so you're like, I'm gonna choose the thing that's gonna be help me build as quickly as possible. But
Yeah.
in the back of your mind is always, okay, but at some point, if we're successful and we hit the front page of Hacker News, and then we raise 100 million, and then we do all this stuff, I don't want to be in a position where I have to migrate all of my
Yeah.
databases and services, because I know I'm going to have more important things to think about. So that's why, and that's the reason we're so upfront about it being just Postgres, is to give that confidence of like, well, I'm not gonna have to churn later.
Yeah, that makes sense. But one thing I saw is that like I think I'm sure like when I interviewed you last, like the hero section was like the big title was like open source Firebase alternative. But now I think open source Firebase alternative is like kind of it's in the subtitle, but the main title is like build in a weekend, scale to millions, or billions, I think.
Billions now.
Billions. Okay.
after we hit,
I'm out of date.
After we hit GA, because that's what we wanted with GA. We were like, we want people to come build quickly with Supabase and be able to service millions of users. And when we had, I think now we've got like about 20 of our users themselves have in the millions of end users.
Wow.
Then we are like, okay, now we can announce that we're generally available because we're confident that it can scale to millions.
Yeah.
But then we were like, but now we have to be more ambitious. Like it doesn't, millions doesn't cut it anymore. We need to go bigger. So we upgraded it to building a weekend scale to billions. Yeah. But your point about demoting the open source Firebase alternative.
Yeah.
Like people ask us all the time, why don't you just remove it completely? Because Supabase now is more than just a Firebase alternative.
Yeah.
But the thing it does that we haven't found another way to express is it communicates that you can connect to Supabase directly from the client. That you get the auth layer. That it's a bit more of a backend as a service, which we can say backend as a service,
but then that's not
but that also doesn't necessarily communicate that extra bit of, but there's a JavaScript client library, there's a Python client library, there's these mobile client libraries. It doesn't express that like Supabase comes all the way to the client. Which if you can help us think of another way to express that in a single sentence, I would be very grateful.
Yeah. DM Ant with your best suggestion. Maybe a Supabase job is the prize if they get.
Definitely.
That's a really hard one because I think Firebase has like such a good, it's like so well understood, I think, in the dev community.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that classic thing of like, tell people the benefit, don't tell them like, you don't need to be specific about like how it actually works and what it is. It's like, what are they going to get? And it's
Mm.
like, well, you're going to be able to build quickly, connect directly to the client. And actually then the database is completely different. Postgres, it's not MongoDB or whatever Firebase was originally built on.
Yeah. That makes sense. And then one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was so we got to hang out at this last year at the AI Engineers Summit, and so there it was very obvious that like a lot of people are doing stuff with vector databases, and that Supabase has been really riding that wave. Like a lot of people that are building with kind of AI tools, AI products are using Supabase. Could you talk a bit about what that's been like and the story? I know there's quite an interesting story about how that happened with one of your team building out something.
Yeah. So Greg, who's
It's a
now on
great
our team,
legend.
yeah, was in the community, and he said, I really want to use PG Vector with Supabase. PG Vector is an extension for Postgres that allows you to store vector embeddings, which are needed for certain RAG applications and AI workloads and stuff. And he was like, PG Vector's here. Here's the PR that integrates PG Vector into Supabase. And we were like, great, thank you, merged. By the way, do you want a job? And that's kind of like how Greg came in. And he obviously like built a bunch of other cool stuff, which convinced us that this guy is just incredible. And he also like had his own amazing YouTube channel, actually, which was just like doing numbers, like educating people how to use, how to build RAG applications and stuff. So we were like, this guy is just the
He
bomb.
needs to be hired.
Yeah. And I think now like Greg's not in the DevRel team, but if you look at like the numbers he does on the Supabase YouTube, like are just like way up there. So
Really?
he kind of like does DevRel as like as a part-time thing, just like as part of his job, but and absolutely kills it. But the AI conference that we went to was interesting for us as well, because that's the first time we've sponsored a conference. Like before that, like I said, everything we did was online, and that was our first like trial of like, okay, like let's see how this works. Like let's see if it produces numbers like and signups for us. And the interesting thing about the conference was, in the history of Supabase, that week we had the highest number of logos sign up to Supabase than ever before. So like logos being like known brands, like known companies. And I think that was the thing I didn't realize was like, doing 100% online marketing. We also sweep up a lot of logos, but if you want to do something where the ratio is just tipped towards larger companies, then conferences is where it's at. And maybe everybody already knows that, but it took me experiencing it firsthand to figure that out. So we'll be now at like, we're going to Next.js Conf. We just launched this big integration with Vercel. So we were at Next.js Conf and chatting to folks there as well. So if this might come out before then, I think that's like middle of October, and come along and we'll be there.
Yeah, I think it should be. Yeah, that's awesome. And you've also done a lot of kind of community meetups as well, right? Like you got like, it's like many, there's images with many meetups.
I think we did 55.
That's crazy.
Cities in 2 weeks.
Because you told me before we started recording, like we don't do in-person stuff really, but you kind of do.
Yeah. Well, it's been, but the thing is, like, the community meetups, we don't run them.
Yeah.
The community does. And all we do is we say, if someone wants to run a Supabase event for your city, like we'll help support, like we'll give you money for food and drink, like we'll send you content, we'll like tell you how it typically works. But it's up to the hosts, and the hosts have just like, I've got so much love for these people because they are just, you know, putting on these events in like, some of the cities are crazy. Like there's just all over South America, like all over Asia, like Maidstone in the UK. Like who would have thought there would be a meetup in Maidstone, a Supabase meetup, right? But they're just like getting these dev communities together to talk about Supabase, which again is another thing that I just didn't think would happen, you know?
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I'm so like, the thing that really stings is that we can't go to all these events, you know, like I want to go and I want to talk to the people there.
Yeah.
And like, be like, how did you learn about Supabase? You know, like, what are you building? Like, what's bad? Like, tell us how to improve.
Yeah.
And we can't go to them all, which is, I don't know, maybe one day when I retire from Supabase, I can find the time to travel the world.
Can help out with the Maidstone event. Maidstone, for anyone listening that's not from the UK, is like, I guess if they've watched The Office and like Scranton, it's probably like a bit of a Scranton or something. Like,
I've never been, so I don't want to diss it too much. I'm sure it's lovely.
It's probably not on like the business map where like people are flying in to go to Maidstone, let's say. That's amazing. And so like, have you seen like a lot of benefits from those in-person ones, like the community meetups, or is it?
That bit is less about like, oh, how many top of funnel do we have? How many leads are we converting? How many whatever? It's more about just like growing the community, then gives this extra level of support to anyone else who's trying to use Supabase. So like, one of the best things about Supabase is, if you get stuck on something, you post on Twitter or you post on Reddit or you post on Discord, it's likely that someone in the community will come and solve your problem before the team gets to see it. So I think that's what's been great about these community meetups, is people can give each other tips, solve each other's problems. And actually the thing that I think is coolest is, me and Copple's my co-founder, know each other and learn about our working styles and build cool things together before Supabase, through doing hackathons and like tech meetups and get-togethers. And the thing that excites me the most is like, people are going to be meeting their co-founders at these events, because it's all people who are trying to build stuff.
Yeah.
You know, they're all builders. They're all like, probably like at the first stage of trying to get something to work. And that's where you're going to meet other cool builders at these meetups, which is very cool.
Yeah. And I think that's something that you've done really well, because for anyone listening, I ran like 2 of the Supabase meetups in London like last year. And then people were asking me, like, they just assumed that I worked for Supabase. And then they were like, I was like, I don't work for Supabase. Like, and then like, why are you running this? And it was like, firstly, because I really like you and Paul and the team and stuff, and like, you've been super helpful to me. But then also because I think like your whole message around like building a weekend scale to millions is like, just like attracts, or billions, sorry, attracts like a lot of really cool people. And I think it's like, it is a really nice community. And there's also, I made friends at some of the meetups and like people I'm still in touch with. And there's a lot of crossover in like other cool London communities of like, kind of like indie hackers and like, dev tools people. It's like, there's a lot of crossover. And so yeah, I think that's quite, I don't know if that was something that you thought consciously about, like in terms of that kind of archetype of person. But it's like quite a cool type of person.
Definitely. And there's a funny story, actually. The first San Francisco meetup that we did was run by us. So we went and we hosted an event. And then afterwards, we just went to the pub and we said to everyone, anyone who wants to come, we go in the pub. And we had like, 60 people come to the pub. And then the host from this time, so it's no longer run by me and Koppel, but the host said, "Oh, I did the meetup, but then when we finished, everyone was really insistent that we go to the pub." You know? So he was like, "I actually just got dragged to the pub, and everyone just wanted to hang out and like carry on and like carry
That's
on talking
great.
about things they've built and stuff." So it's quite funny.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, and so if you were like, so now like 4 years in, if you were going back and talking to like someone that is starting out, what kind of stuff would you be telling them? Someone building the next Supabase or the next um, something else maybe as well.
Yeah, yeah. What one thing is, and people ask this question. Often it's people who are already considering it,
Mm.
but the open source thing. So people have launched their products, they've got a few users, and then they come to us and they say, "We're thinking about open sourcing this. Um, do you think that's cool? Like, what are the benefits? What are the trade-offs?"
Mm.
And I'm always like pro. I'm like, yeah, just do it. Like, there's so many benefits that aren't even obvious on the surface and on day
Mm.
one, such as hiring. Hiring's a big one that kicks in
Mm.
later. Um, that it's worth doing. And of the companies who've followed through and done it, they're like, it's like night and day. So they launched their initial proprietary version, and then later they launched the open source version, and the
Yeah.
open source version like hits the front page of Hacker News,
Yeah.
and it has all this conversation, and people are jumping in and getting excited about it. That's still my biggest piece of advice: is that it doesn't work for everyone, but if there's a small window where you're considering should this be open source, just do it, because like it's A, it's better for everyone, and B, it's better for you and your chances of, I think, getting past that first stage.
Mm.
Because it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing is getting the first user, getting the first 3 users, getting the first 5 users is
Mm.
way harder than getting the next 1,000 users when you've already got 50,000.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Uh, what are like the non-obvious benefits? So you mentioned hiring.
I'd say like just guesstimating that like 40% of the people who work at Supabase
No way.
probably contributed before they joined
40%.
before they joined the team in some way. And it might have been, like they did some moderation
Mm.
in the GitHub. It doesn't mean you've come in and you've built a whole huge feature. It can be like you've engaged in some way through, maybe you opened a GitHub issue,
Yeah.
and helped us work through it. There's a long history of people who came in through the open source community. The second one is just developers are just more philosophically aligned
Mm.
with the idea of open source than being proprietary. Um, it's a great way to compete against incumbents, because incumbents, there's just too much red tape for them to ever have the possibility of open sourcing their proprietary tech. The lawyers would never accept it. The business people would never accept it. So if you're going head to head with someone that is already well established, it's just a huge leg up. It's a huge advantage that you've got. Yeah, and the things that people worry about is like, isn't someone going to take my thing and like use it against me, like compete against me with the tech I've built?
AWS.
But
Yeah.
you are the expert in your product. I just think the chances, and most of the time, like people who have followed Supabase and tried to compete with us, they don't want to, like, they want to write the code. They want to do things their way anyway. And we have had people for Supabase and create competitive services, but like I say, like, we're the experts in building Supabase.
Yeah.
We've got, almost 100 people now who are just like night and day. know it inside out, the best in the world at what they do, like you're not going to compete with us on building the next version,
Yeah.
the next generation of the Supabase offering, basically.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like it sounds, it is funny. It's like when imagine someone saying, "Oh, that's just like a Superbase fork," like kind of sounds bad. I could imagine the only time that would ever be good is if like that team had basically given up and it was like, everyone knew no one, that company was just like a cash cow. No one gave a shit. And then it was like, yeah, these guys forked them and they made it better. But like,
Yeah,
then I feel like that's the bigger problem is not that like someone forked you. It's like that you just stopped giving a damn about.
exactly. Yeah, like you get acquired or you change your license. Like that's the biggest
Oh
one.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
Like the
someone,
HashiCorp
yeah,
thing.
like makes it closed source, and then
Yeah.
everyone's like, okay, then I guess we'll fork it and make a better version.
Yeah, true, 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 true. But not from like you're doing well, you're still meeting the expectations that you set out at the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then to your point, like if that happens, then you probably deserve deserve to
Yeah,
lose.
it's like that's a consequence of your previous actions rather than like the thing that killed you.
Yeah.
And I guess people also like, are you finding now that you're selling to like enterprises and stuff like that they prefer open source?
Yeah, and we have people who come in, I'd say especially on the enterprise side, and they say, "Oh, I need login for Azure on the auth
Mm,
service," and then they come in and they have a 5-person team who build it and ship it into our product, into the open source product. Um,
really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I'd say, like some of the enterprise customers like do more of the open source development than anyone else.
Really?
And again, like it just improves the product for everyone who
Yeah.
follows, which is great. Um, and that's particularly cool. Actually, this is another benefit of open source is that let's say like log in with Azure, it's not like super high on our priority
Yeah.
list. We have like 50 other things which are just way more like important for us to ship, but it is still important, like, but
Mm,
it's not crucial. And
yeah.
that's where like we'll eventually get to it. But someone in the community can come in and say, this is high priority for me. I'm going to do it in 2 days. And then it's available for everyone. Like that's just a huge benefit to us and to the community and to the customers.
Yeah.
Um,
This kind of differences in importance, they can just have a vote, like essentially like buy or like code their way to this getting built.
yeah.
Yeah. That's super
Um,
cool.
yeah. And then, enterprise, I think like they just want to know that you're not going to disappear
Yeah.
next year, basically.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you kind of like we've been around for 5 years now. You need that in the bank to convince anyone that you're going to be around for the next five.
Yeah.
And like we're well funded. Um, like we have an incredible like infrastructure team, the support
Mm,
team. All these people are just like experts in Postgres, experts in Supabase. That's what they need to see before they
mm,
even try it out, and that's what's starting to happen now. I think is like we've always had devs using us for their side projects, and internally they're saying to the boss, can't we just
yeah.
use Supabase for this new project?
Yeah.
And I think like over the last like 12 months, that's the answer to those questions have started to be yes. Started to
Yeah.
be like, they've got more confidence now that we're not gonna just disappear next year.
Yeah. Which is really hard. I feel like there's not many shortcuts to that.
You can't do that in 12 months. You can't like
Yeah.
build your way around that. It's
Yeah.
just you need time in the market.
Yeah.
You need to have like a great security track record. You need to have a great stability track record. It just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I realize we're actually at time. So I'm sure you need to go. So thank you so much for coming back. And thank you so much for like coming on like the first time round as well, like and just being so supportive and stuff. And just I will say for other people and has been so helpful to me in terms of like just giving me feedback on the show and like how to make it better and how to like market it better. And, you know, for someone so busy, that's just incredibly, incredibly great. And I say to everyone, like, the Supabase guys are just so nice. And so, you know, they really are great. And, yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And, yeah, thank you.
Well, we love your work, man. And you've got to give us a little something after 100 episodes. You've got to give us like, what
Yeah.
what are you going to take from the first 100 that you're going to like carry over to the next 100?
Yeah, I am working on something slowly. I spoke to 100 DevTools founders, and here's what I learned. That's, I think, the working title.
Are you actually going to do that?
Yeah. Adam Frankel gave me the title of that. You know, Adam Frankel, the VP of marketing guy. Yeah, very cool guy. He was like, "That's your title, Jack."
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I think, like, honestly, like, I can't say enough, like, doing 100 episodes is epic. Like did you think that when you started, did you think you were gonna get to this point?
Actually, well, I don't know, but I did actually, I think I listened to like Mr. Beast or someone, and they said like your first thing should just be like, just do 100. Like he was talking about videos, do 100 videos, and then don't worry about anything else, just do 100. So like, that's pretty much what I did. Maybe took that too literally sometimes, where I should have been like refining a bit more. But that was the goal, is just do 100. So yeah, it's definitely been a target of mine.
That's epic, man. Well, I'm looking forward to the next 100. For sure. So,
yeah, scale to billions.
Definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, and thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening. Supabase.com, Ant Wilson on Twitter. You just Ant Wilson on Twitter.
Yeah. Ant Wilson. Yeah. If you sign up to Supabase, you can expect some emails from me telling you when you haven't had any API requests.
The bane of my existence when I'm working on side projects. Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Thanks, Ant, and thanks everyone for listening, especially for those that have been around since the early episodes. Really appreciate it.
Definitely.
Also, sorry, just thanks, Elliot, for editing the episodes. You do a great job. Thank you.